Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars. Today I have a special guest joining me in the dungeon. I've got Nathan from Nathan's Lawns and Gardens. How you doing, Nathan?
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. I saw you did an interview with Mark Boris last week, and as soon as I saw that was available, I hit the download button and listened to it straight away. And it was very insightful because a lot of people would have seen you on social media, but not a lot of people know much about you. And so listening to your interview with Mark Boris, I was like, wow, there's a whole side to Nathan that we need to explore. And that's why I thought reach out and see if you'll do an interview with me as well.
Yeah, definitely, mate. Definitely. When you gave me a call, I was like, love to. Thanks for having me on.
So, Nathan, most of your audience is going to be general public, and they come to your videos because of the satisfying nature of the work you do and the ideology of helping people out doing free mows for them. But my audience is predominantly Australian lawn mowing contractors. And that means that the people listening to this, they'll know who you are, but they probably don't know a lot about the business model that you've used over time. So if we wind the clock back a little bit, you've been running a lawn care business for a while before you actually started doing the social media side of it, yeah?
Correct. I started my own business in 2010.
Same year I started, exactly.
Oh, seriously? Well, there you go. And
Yeah,
prior to that, I had done a lot of labouring. Yeah, so I was the guy out there mowing lawns and all
yeah,
that kind of stuff, doing all the hard jobs and whatnot. And then I decided, look, I didn't know what I was going to do. If you've heard, obviously, a bit of the interview with Mark, you know, a bit about, a little bit about my life. I tried everything, did everything, and probably the only thing I was sort of okay with and enjoyed was lawn mowing. As a lot of people, you started at an early age. You know, your parents make you mow the lawn and all that kind of stuff. And so I made that
yeah,
step into my own business, and I had that for 15 years. Doing the daily grind like a lot of the guys out here that are listening to and all that kind of stuff. And then obviously, about 6 years into it, I started filming some of my work. And then that's how I sort
yeah, okay.
of went through the social media aspects of things.
Yeah, well, so when you started videoing it, you wouldn't have gone viral straight away, right? It would have taken a little while before it went viral. But um, did you video it with a view to trying to create social media, or was it just a way of documenting what you're doing and having a bit of fun?
Look, as a lot of people, in the industry, in the lawn mowing industry, it's a tough grind. It's physical work, it's hard work, especially here in
Yeah,
Australia, summer, hot, all that kind of stuff. I think,
yeah,
obviously through my life, I had a troubled childhood, and, into my teens and all of that.
yeah,
Uh, I needed I love doing a lot of things, but I never really had a hobby. And for some reason, once I started going, well, let's just record it. I didn't have a goal to be where I was today, but it was more of like a hobby, just for something for me to do. I enjoyed doing it. It was different. As I gradually started, I knew that if you could grow a page, then obviously you can get sponsors and all that kind of stuff can come into play. And I guess earlier on then I was thinking more of, because remember when I started, everything was secondhand equipment, secondhand car. I never had the best of the best. I was still using a push lawnmower for about the first 3 years of my career. I never had a self-propelled
yeah,
lawnmower. Looking back, um, I shake my head on that one because
yeah,
a lot of hard work I did, but it would have been a lot easier, and then obviously
yeah.
I started realizing by, if I grow my channels and maybe a sponsor might come in and I might be lucky enough to get a self-propelled lawnmower or something like that. That's sort of how I looked at it, but never thought it would be where it
Yeah.
is today.
So that's got to have blown you away the difference between what your expectations were at the start compared to where you've ended up.
Oh, definitely, mate, definitely. As I said, back when I started, there would have only been on social media, there was only a handful of people around the world doing it that maybe had a bit of a
Yeah,
presence online, like probably no more than five. And there wasn't really
yeah,
many in Australia doing it. So I did
no,
sort of look at it when I started. After I started a bit, I thought, well, you know what? Let's push on this and see what happens.
yeah. And I think if we wind the clock back in that time frame, when I started lawn mowing, same time you started lawn mowing, there wasn't really a social media presence. YouTube was a thing, but there wasn't a reality TV component to YouTube in that sense. It was more about handyman type stuff, how to replace the head on your car or how to change your gearbox or something like that.
Yeah.
And then we saw a few channels popping up from the US, and then I think Martin from Mowing and Growing was one of the first Australian channels that was well recognised. And yeah, no, he's still going pretty strong as well. But the the early days, it wasn't viral content; it was very niche content.
Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, I can imagine when you started, it would have still been fairly niche.
Yeah, so like, as you said, it was YouTube was probably where most of the stuff really was, and I didn't really have a great understanding of all of it on YouTube. As I said,
Yeah.
Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that was where I just didn't really see a lot of it happening.
Yeah, and that's changed massively over the last few years, even where Facebook, Instagram, TikTok have all become the platforms of choice. And I think that those three are the platforms of choice now for most social media content. And I would say, even to the point that Facebook is probably dominant if you're wanting to do video format content on
Yeah,
social media, then that's where the most value is for Australia. I think outside of Australia, TikTok might hold better value, but
yeah. So, like, just to give you an idea, when you say that, so like, and still to this day, so obviously the platforms, you got YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, all those things. A lot of people don't realize that TikTok in Australia does not pay. You don't get paid in Australia on TikTok for views and all that kind of stuff. And you can go Google it. It's only
yeah,
a certain amount of countries. So I don't make a cent on TikTok. And Instagram as well does not
yeah,
pay. So just putting out there, I don't make any money on that. It's more, as I said,
yeah,
obviously everyone knows you can on YouTube and you can a bit on Facebook, but it's not across all platforms. So for me, it was sort of more of just a hobby. I guess people
yeah.
sort of enjoyed it, and I was enjoying it, and it was keeping me out of trouble.
And of course, like you mentioned, the hope of getting a couple of brands on board and getting a self-propelled mower was one of the motivating factors. So that also is an interesting topic because that's not relying on the platform to pay you. That's relying on the industry wanting to gain coverage through your media.
Yeah, correct, and
So
100%.
in
And
essence,
how you were saying it, like when I started, there was only a handful of people doing it, and you know,
yeah,
it took a few years before the first company reached out and said, "Hey, we want to, I'd love to send you a self-propelled lawnmower," and I'll never forget the day. And for me, it was like Christmas because just actually using a self-propelled lawnmower, I was like, what have I missed all these years? Seriously.
if you're out there tackling strata sites, commercial grounds, retirement villages, or those tough summer acres, you know a full commercial mower makes all the difference. That's why more commercial contractors are switching to Right Standers, the original stand-on mower, available in Australia through Cox dealers nationwide. Built tough for our conditions, the legendary AeroCore deck delivers a flawless, even cut every time. Quick manoeuvrability in tight spots, compact design for easier trailer loading, Kawasaki or Briggs engines, hydro gear drives, and a serious commercial durability. Stand instead of sit for less fatigue, better visibility, quicker jobs, and more profit in the bank. From the Standard B for great value to the X or ZK for next level performance, everyone is raving about the upgrade. Head to rightmowers.australia.com.au or your local dealer today. Be sure to mention Aussie Lawn Stars. Right Mowers get the job done faster, cleaner, and easier. Your back and your business will thank you. I started my business with a ride-on lawnmower, and so I actually had the ride on and a self-propelled. And then at one stage, I'd talked to people who were saying, you know what, a non-self-propelled mower is so much lighter and easier to work with, and it's a better machine to work with. So I actually gave that a try, and I thought, what are these people smoking? That's crazy.
Yeah,
Why would you want to
yeah,
do that?
yes, yeah. Well, that was a big difference. I noticed when I got the self-propelled lawnmower is just how heavy everything was. Totally different, but it was definitely, I thought,
Yeah,
easier on the body.
for sure. And even though they've got a little bit of extra weight to them, unless you're lifting them up and down stairs, then the
Yeah,
self-propelled is way better for you.
100%.
But so outside of social media, I think one of the things that I try and give my listeners is looking at what people do in their business to either run their business efficiently or make sure they're profitable. And so we got a little bit of insight into your startup where you're running a non-self-propelled push mower, um, and doing the hard yards. I'm guessing struggling to work out business practices and those sorts of things as well. Like you're saying, you try a bit of this and a bit of that, and dabbled in social media as a way of trying to help you get a little bit ahead. So, were you doing this in Sydney when you started?
Yep. So I started. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's all been in Sydney the whole time, other than when obviously now when I take the new road I've taken outside of Australia, but everything's been in Sydney, and
yeah,
you go into a business and there was so much I had to learn, so much, and even still today I'm still learning, from fellow contractors or whatever. It does, for me it doesn't matter how long you've
yeah,
been in the business. There's always something new to learn.
definitely. And I guess that's one of the things I've found that around the time you started doing the social media is that the social media presence for our industry became really strong as well. And so that's where a lot of people who had already been in the industry found that networking, having Facebook groups, that sort of thing, helped to make sure that they were competitive in their pricing. Not competitive in terms of going to the lowest price, but competitive in terms of knowing what value was represented for the customers and making sure that they're actually running a sustainable business model. So I know in the early days with Facebook groups, we're looking at people making outlandish claims about, oh, I can get $800 for that job, or that's not a $50 job. That's insane. And the banter back and forth, I would say overall has been really valuable because it's helped the industry lift its game and know the value. But one of the downsides there is that people tend to embellish a little bit. And so there's a lot of people that will say their best numbers. And I've been guilty of doing the same thing, right? So in the early days, I did a job that took me less than a whole day and I got $800 for it. And back then, I was happy when I was doing $400, $500 days. So $800 in one job in one day, I was like, hey, join the industry. You can make $800 in a day. And
Mm, mm, mm,
that's not
mm.
what I was doing every day. So
Yeah,
everybody has this tendency to sort of talk about the good side and not focus on reality. But we've seen that come up in your content occasionally as well. When you've been doing work out of the goodness of your heart to help people, but you've come across the odd instance where contractors have quoted prices that seem outlandish.
yeah. So look, and I always say, look, so I'll first go back a bit. When I first started, my first job in 2010 was $20. I made a front full yard
Yeah.
and I cut their hedge. I would have been there for an hour and a half for $20 cash. You know what?
Yep.
Back then, I knew it was worth more, but it was my first customer, and I was like, I'm in. I'm happy. Let's just keep moving from there. My second customer was a $15. $15 I drove 20 minutes for every Friday. I invoiced him as well. It was to blow a path in
Yep.
Hunters Hill, probably the richest house in Hunters Hill, for $15. So I'm
Yeah.
paying tax on that. And I didn't
Yeah.
want to get rid of that job. I kept it for about 2 years because I was too afraid to go up to him and say, "Can I have a pay rise?" I'll be honest. And now I look back and I go, "What was I
Mm.
doing?" But when I started, yeah, I underquoted badly. and I did. Quoting was very
I
difficult for me to learn
yeah,
how to do it right. People saying you got to do an hourly rate, then all of a sudden it was fixed price, all this kind of stuff. And,
yeah,
obviously through where I am now, things have changed. And I will always say, I got to where I did through hard work. I've seen both sides
yeah,
of the thing. And, I'm allowed to be where I am today. I earned that. um, you know,
yeah.
it's not you just upload a video and that's it. There's a lot of hard work that goes behind social media, and the more people you have on there,
Of course.
the more people you've got to respond to. It's a full time job. It's not just as easy as what people
Yeah,
think. And obviously, when I got into my business, and obviously I learned through speaking to other contractors, and one thing I
yeah,
always say on my page, and I say, you're running a business. You've got to make money on a business. You've got
yeah,
to cover costs, and I've never shied away from it. You've got to cover costs. You've got to pay yourself. You've got a family to provide, whatever tools, all that. I get all that, but I've always said,
yeah,
for me, is you must, in my opinion, uh, do the right thing by, I always say, the elderly people, or someone that's really struggling. Look after them.
yeah.
Yeah, don't go in there.
I've done this with a
Rip them
couple of
off.
customers in the early days. I had two customers that I put my prices up on, and they were jobs where I was wary about putting my prices up. But like you, I was undercharging, so I'd go through and review it, and I go, okay, this lady that's elderly, I've been doing her lawn for $40, and she likes to let it go until it really needs doing. So I'd spend an hour and a half there. And one day I approached her and her daughter, and I said, "Hey, you know what? $40 is not cutting it. I'm going to charge you 50, and that's not enough, but that will make sure you're getting a very healthy pensioners discount, and
Yeah,
I'm just breaking even on the job." And she sacked me on the spot.
yeah, 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 mate.
And
We
it was good.
we could sit here. And I think a lot of the people in the lawn mowing industry, we would all have very similar stories of, there's so many jobs I've underquoted. I've been every week I turn up. I'm like, today's the day. I'm going to tell them it's going up $5, and then I go to say, here's your
Yeah.
invoice and all that, and I go, all right, see you next week, and I walk off. And I'm like, I just couldn't do it to them, And I was the one losing out, but I was
Yeah.
like, and in hindsight, I would end up doing a lot more properties and destroy my body doing it, but
Yeah.
obviously it took a bit of learning for me to get it, and the confidence to be able to speak up to some of these people. And I did learn over time, what, sometimes it's meant to be. You're going to lose some, but you're always going to pick up another customer because there's so much work out there for everyone.
Of course. Yeah. But I guess one of the factors that came into this in the early days for me, and I think this is what's come up for you more recently. I was doing a lot of jobs where I was discounting myself. And I say it that way because I'm the one who's suffering when I discount, right? But I was discounting myself because I could see that those people were in need. So I would work out and go, okay, if somebody needs a cheaper price, and there was one job, I had an employee, and the customer, can barely even call them a customer. They had a disability and they couldn't look after themselves, let alone their lawn. So they said, "Oh, can you come and cut our grass? And what's the cheapest price possible?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah, you know what? If I don't do the whippersnipping and I don't do the edges and I just come in with the ride-on mower, it'll be in and out, and I'll charge. I think it was about $50 I was charging them." And I explained this to my employee, and he just couldn't cope. He's like, "Do a job without doing the whippersnipping?"
Mm, mm, mm.
He's like, I feel bad because it's not up to the standard. And of course, I'm trying to run my business by providing a professional standard of service. And I was like, yes, but in this case, we're helping somebody. It's actually helping them, and it doesn't matter.
Yep.
That's what they want.
See, I had I not on all, but a lot. I was the same. If I just mowed the lawn, I just I don't know if I've got OCD or something going on. I had to quickly go around anyway. I'd still do it. I'd just trim the edges. It might not have been perfect, but I would have still gone on them just because I got more satisfaction when walking out going, it looks better than, just skimming over
Yeah,
with the lawnmower or something. And there's obviously people in the street that are
yeah,
driving past. They may not know the story and they might be thinking, oh, this
yeah,
bloke, we're not going to hire him. He's not doing a good job. You know what I mean?
yeah. Yep. And
I
these are the
mean,
things you think about when you're running a business. Yeah, one of those things that you're thinking about as a business, and you're going, I need my business to be looking professional. I don't want to be taking just the cheap jobs. I want to be making sure that I'm doing good quality work and getting the right price for the quality of work. And that means you constantly rethink things about your pricing. You go and target jobs that you know need to be more expensive so that they're covering your needs and your expenses and making a little bit of profit. But when you run a business, you constantly think about these things. And what I did in the earlier days, and now I'm not doing any residential work, but I used to deliberately make sure I was charging enough money to be profitable on all of my jobs. And then when I knew somebody was in need, I would say, hey, look, your job is worth $50 or $80 or $100 or whatever I thought it was worth. And I said, don't pay me unless you can afford to. I will do the work, maintain it, have fortnightly mow, and just pay me if you can afford to, but know that this is what's worth. Because in one of those instances where I hadn't said that, they'd turned around and told their friends, hey, Gary does a really cheap price. Give him a call.
yeah, yeah, yeah. See, look, obviously, it's different the position I am when a lot of lawn mowing contractors listen to me now,
Now,
but
yeah,
I I have been there for many, many years doing exactly what everyone's doing. The grinding, the struggle, all that stuff. And I totally get it all. I can give you many examples. Even, regular clients, I'd just be there to mow their lawn, front and back. I'd go from the front yard to the backyard. I'd walk down the side of the house. There was weeds everywhere. Now, none of that's a part of what I got to do. I'm there to mow the lawn. But I'd always walk through and I'd have the whippersnipper and I'd just go through and I'd do it
yeah,
as one line when I was going through and one when I was coming back. I wouldn't charge him. I'd just do that stuff because I took pride in what I do. And I thought, and I always had the attitude that you just do that little extra word of mouth. I always say word of
yeah,
mouth is the best form of advertising and they will notice it, and that's how I operated. And
yeah,
believe me, there were thousands of Saturdays that I got up in the morning, ready for 8 o'clock start, and I'd be doing a lawn for $30 or something like that. That was worth 60, $70. I knew that.
mhm,
But I was my
yeah,
my 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 model was different when I started. I was young. I was in my early 20s. I had
yeah,
obviously a very difficult life prior. I'd stuffed a lot of things up, and all I wanted to do was just have a
yeah,
job, succeed, and bring in money at that stage to support my partner, and those kind of things. So I was more hungry just to work and just do something with my life. And as I said, it took a few years before I had enough clients, and then I could maybe get rid of some of the ones that I didn't need anymore, and where the prices started
yeah,
going up a little bit. And
yeah.
obviously, I could be a little bit more picky and choosy, if that makes sense. But I couldn't when I started because this
Yeah.
was my job.
And that's one of the recommended paths to take to increase profitability with your businesses. As you gain customers, you start dropping off the ones that are not good payers and the ones that are lower priced, underpriced, or you bump them up in price and let them filter themselves out and drop off if they don't like the increase in the price. And then you start bringing in new jobs and you go, okay, if I'm quoting per job, I'm going to be doing the maths in my head anyway and going, okay, I think this job's worth $80, or I think I'm going to be here for half an hour and I need to make $100 an hour or whatever the rate might be that you're working around. So you go through your head when you're doing a new quote and go, okay, I want to bring this one in at the higher end of what I think I'm worth, not the lower end, because I've got to bring those lower end up to where I'm worth. And that's a constant strategy for people who are trying to make sure they fit the market well and they've got their quality of work at the point where they can go, yep, I'm a professional and I want to be treated with respect as a business owner and operator.
And I've always and I totally get all that, and I'm totally all for that stuff. But I will just quickly touch on just on obviously there was a video that I made here recently, and
Yes.
all I can say on that is it was something about I did a video. I was out right out west in Bidwell, a very there was a low income area that I was in, housing commission whatnot. It was a senior citizen,
Yeah. Okay.
and I went in there, and you know, she needed a hand. She couldn't mow a lawn. She didn't have a lawnmower. She wasn't going to look after. She had housing
Yeah.
on her back. They were threatening to evict her if she hadn't mowed a lawn. And I went in there. Now, if you're in the industry, you've mowed thousands of lawns. You know how processes can work. She
Yeah.
says in the video she was quoted $300, and you see my reaction go, how much? She said $300. And for me, I'm going to cop heat from people in the industry because you want to have the industry where it's, known for this is not just a, hey, we're a quick cash job. This is a professional industry and all that kind of stuff. But as I said,
Yeah.
you're also how I always ran my business was I looked after people like this, and I knew that she was never going to mow her lawn after I left. She just needed to get
Yeah.
herself into trouble. And that meant I'm not here to
Yep.
mow a lawn and catch the grass and give her a bowling green lawn and all that, because that's not what it was about. It's about what's the
Yeah.
easiest and quickest way. And I looked at the job and I knew I could have been in and out, and I'm 46 or 45 at that stage. So I'm not as fit as I was 20 years ago. And I knew I still could have been out of there in 30,
Yeah.
35 minutes by just mulching it on the highest setting. Now, it wasn't going to look beautiful. It was going to
Yeah.
look 100 times better. She was going to be out of trouble, and everything was going to be okay. And if I was charging
Yeah.
her for that job, I would have still looked at her and said $150, high end. That's me, because I'm in and out in half an hour and I'm not removing anything. And I did
Yeah.
say, for me personally, when I see that stuff, and I always lived by that through my career, I found that on my thing, I found that excessive, because if I know as a professional in this industry, there were other ways that we could have gone in to help her with the lower end to get her out of trouble. And I stick by what I said,
Yeah.
that I thought $300 was for me personally, what gives the industry the bad name. People say about, the $50 kid and all of that, the cowboys or whatever they call them, that cowboy word.
Yep.
And I was speaking to
Yep.
someone the other day, and I said, "Do you know what? Those guys that come in here that do the $50 jobs or the $40 jobs or whatever, because I did, I don't knock them.
Mm.
If they're willing to get out there
Yeah.
and work hard, because it's a hard industry we're in, work hard to scrape by and get a few dollars to support them and their family, then I am all for them doing that. I don't knock them. There's enough work
Yeah.
out. I think it's the people that charge over prices, especially for senior citizens, is what gives us a bad name. That's how I looked at it, and that's obviously through that video. I copped a bit of heat, but it's funny after many people
Yeah.
listen to Mark Burris, my interview, or the contractors that know me, and there's thousands out there that I'm friends with and whatnot. They understand where I'm coming from and what it is, and in
Yeah.
my years doing this, I've found that those guys or girls or whoever that want to go in and charge incredibly high, you don't see them around the industry for long. It's the ones that of course need to make
Yeah.
some money and profit, but not overcharging ridiculous prices, that mainly have a very good and steady income and a successful business, is what I have found in the industry, if that makes sense.
I've got a quick shout out to our sponsor, Sortscape, at sortscape.com/lawnstars. Job management built specifically for lawn mowing and garden maintenance. If you're still running your business off a paper diary or a basic calendar, Sortscape gives you the stuff they can't: drag and drop scheduling, route optimization, automatic customer text and email reminders, plus job timers, so you can track time on site and cut the after hours paperwork. Visit sortscape.com/lawnstars. It also keeps your crew organised with customer history, notes and photos right in the app, so you're not relying on memory or pretty sure we did that last time. Visit sortscape.com/lawnstars. I think a lot of people misrepresented that because they didn't see it as housing commission and somebody that couldn't afford to pay for a job to be have the grass taken away, for it to be done as a manicured lawn. And of course, it's not a manicured lawn; it's an overgrown lawn, right?
Yeah.
So when I look at that in my business over time, I go, okay, there's plenty of times, and my business model has revolved around mulching, not catching most of the time. But there's plenty of times where you can say to a customer, we're never going to make this look pretty on the first cut. There's a bunch of ways we can treat this. So one of them is a slash and dash, which is, just cut it from long to reasonably manageable and walk away. And that's the cheapest possible option. And then if they're a real estate and they want it to look pretty for photos for putting it up for sale, then you give them the hard word and you say, you know what, this is going to cost you more and it's going to take time for it to look nice because we've got to cut it low and then we've got to wait for it to green up a bit and then come back and do another 2 cuts before it's going to look half decent.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
100%.
in that instance, of your job there, that's very clear. And you're fortunate because you can go and do these jobs for free, right? But as a quoted job, you're still going to look after that customer and make sure that you're giving them value for money in terms of what works well for them.
100%. And you nailed so many things on the head there. You know, say, and I'll try to break it down and explain it. So, say I was charging for that job. Yeah. As a lot of people know,
Yeah,
I've stepped away from that stuff now. Obviously, I'm through social media. I've
yeah,
got sponsors and all that. And I want to say, and I never say that, I worked hard for that. And
yeah,
I'm entitled to take whatever comes my way through my hard work, and I'll always say that
of
because I
course.
worked hard for that,
Yeah,
and anyone can go out there and do that if they want to do it. But hating on me for doing it is, from some people, I'm like, why? You know what I mean? But the other thing
well,
is, look, yeah, as you said, I've been in all those jobs where you turn up, it's high, and it's like, well, we need to cut it down, we need to collect the gas, do it all properly, but you could see in the video when I was there, it was a senior citizen. You knew she wasn't going to look after it and you knew she wasn't going to mow it moving forward. So we just give her the easy, quicker way to get her out of trouble so she's not going to have a possibility of eviction. And I don't know why that
yeah,
was so difficult for some people to understand, with all respect there. So we got, at the end of the day, we got her out of trouble. She's still there. That's what
yeah,
we wanted to achieve. And as I said, even if I was in pain, I was charging for that job. It would have never in a million years been up at $300 when I knew I only needed 30, 45 minutes to mulch it down and it was still looking 100
yeah,
times better. And I'm just being honest. And as I said it before and I go back to
yeah,
that. The amount of times I go into a job over the years and I've got them because so many people, and I used to always ask in the beginning, I used to say, well, what were you quoted? Of course, people don't want to tell you because they want to try to get a good deal off you or that. But I was pretty open with a lot of the customers,
yeah,
and a lot would tell me. And the prices that
yeah,
I would hear from some, I'd be like, really?
yeah,
I don't understand. Like four, five, $600 for a lawn for a half an hour. I'd be like, what? That as I
mm,
said, I mean, I pride myself that I built a business where I undercharged a lot, but I built a business where I was reasonable and fair. And then obviously when it grew, even before social media, of course I was making money through the jobs. You move into strata, you move into real estate, whatever. I was looking after properties down on
yeah,
$60 million houses, all that kind of stuff. That's where mine took me. But I still always
yeah.
carried that principle that yes, you make money, you've got to make money, but I was more about just doing it the right way. That's how I operated.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think everyone's got to come up with their own business model, but in the contractor space where they're not doing it for social media following, a lot of people will see a elderly lady who's in housing commission and they will say, I'm not working for you because you can't afford to pay what it's worth for me to be in business, rather than going, oh, maybe I could cut the grass, drop it where it is, and not take it away, and do a valuable service for this person at a price they can afford, they would, yeah, no, red flag, walk away, don't want to touch it.
Yeah.
And that's common experience to look at customers as red flags. And I like to push back on this with contractors in Australia and say, you know what, everything has a price. And so many of the contractors will bring up another issue, which is really commonplace: dog poo. I'm not going to touch dog poo, most contractors will say. And if the customers don't pick up the dog poo, I'm just going to say that's a red flag. You're no longer my customer. See you later. What I've said to people is, you're nothing but a glorified janitor, and there's nothing wrong with being a janitor either, but you're there to clean up somebody's mess. That's what you're there to do. So if you don't like the particular type of mess, you've got two choices. You can say, sorry, I don't do that sort of work, and walk away, or you can say, okay, what is it worth to do that sort of work? And so in the case of dog poo, what I suggest is people just up their price a little bit and deal with it. But in the case of a housing commission location or a job where you know they can't afford for it to be done fortnightly, and you're going to get asked to come back in 6 months and cut the 6 foot high grass back down again, you do a slash and dash. You drop the grass, leave it where it is, and they are happy. They've got the council off their back.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. In my career, when you've got your regular clientele, and then obviously, especially spring, summer,
Yeah.
whatever, the phone's ringing. I only advertised back in the day on, and I don't even know if it's still around, was Gumtree. I never had a website. A lot of my business
Yeah.
came through Gumtree. That actually really helped me a lot, pick up a lot of work over the years. And you get the odd ones that you try to help them out, and then obviously 6 months later, like you said, it's up
Yep.
there, they come back and you knew what was going on. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't like, oh, okay, no worries. Like, there are always limits to my generosity too, where I have to be realistic. But like,
Yeah.
I ran a different style of business. Like, some contractors may say, oh man, this guy's got no idea. Possibly I might have no idea. But like,
Yeah.
I used to see a lot of those posts over the years about the dog poop and all that stuff. You want me to be honest? When that was with me, I didn't have a lot of clientele with dogs and all that kind of stuff. I was pretty lucky that way. And if I had to take on jobs and there
Yeah.
was that out there, I'll be honest, I just mowed over it. Yeah, it stunk. I'd
Yep.
step on it. It'd be in my shoe, it'd stink. It'd be all grooved in there. I get in the car, it'd smell all that. But you know what? I'll be honest. I just mow over it. I didn't care because I was like, it's probably going to be quicker any for me just to mow over that than sit, walk around and pick it all up. At the end of the day, it's fertilizer and it's probably good for the grass, So mate, I just that was just what I did. I'm being honest. I that
Yep.
little
Yeah.
stuff, and I get it. Like, trust me, I get it. It's it smells and all that, but my mowers were old,
Yeah.
so I was just like, whatever. I'm running over it.
Yeah. My attitude has been work out with the customer where the value lies. And with some customers, you go, you know what, they've got three, four, five dogs. I had one that had this situation. He had that many dogs. He would never pick up the dog poo. And he had these beautiful dogs. I can't even remember what they're called, but they're a really nice dog. Three of them. They would come out when I was whippersnipping, and they would chase me around, not to attack me, but to attack the whippersnipper cord. And I said to him, I said, you got to lock your dogs up. Their mouth will bleed from hitting the whippersnipper cord, or from the whippersnipper cord hitting their mouth. And he
Yeah,
says, I can't do it. And I ended up saying, I'm not going to keep mowing your lawn because it's going to hurt your dogs. I won't
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
And it
yeah,
wasn't even about the dog poo in that situation.
yeah,
But yeah, in those situations, it does come down to, what do you get value out of as a business, and what does the customer get value out of? And is the price matching so that you're both happy?
yeah, yeah. And it is. At the end of the day, it's what works for you, really. And as I said, it's what's providing for you
Yeah.
and your family. And I want to clarify. I don't knock people for going out there and making money. That's what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, running a business, you have costs. But as I
Mm.
just wanted to restate, I am just someone that I have a principle of look after some people. That's how I operate, if that makes sense. You can always make some money up on the next job,
Yeah.
but when you know someone really is struggling, just maybe look at the situation, and is there another possibility here that we can make life a little bit easier? That's all it was.
Yeah, look, I think within the contractor market, and this will happen with human nature. It's not necessarily just limited to people in our industry. People like to, and in Australia we do. We like to cut the tall poppy down, right? But
Yeah,
the inverse of that is what I was saying before, we like to brag about our best possible job that we've ever done. And so what happens within the community groups is we build each other up to think that we can charge 150, 200, $300 an hour. And there are jobs where it actually amounts to that if you're stupid enough to say, well, I was there for 15 minutes and I charged them $80. Oh, yeah, what's that? Four times 80. What does that come up to? That's an hourly rate? Yeah. No, that's
yeah,
actually pretty stupid to suggest that that's your hourly rate. But that's the way people look at things. And so it becomes a bit of a French word, pissing contest, right?
yeah,
Who
yeah,
gets the best price? Who does the most? The reality is, in Australia, most of the contractors at the moment doing regular maintained work for good quality clients are going to be hitting around the $100 an hour mark. And give or take a little bit, I had a good chat with some of the best contractors in Australia about this. And if you're doing clients where you're there for more than 15 minutes, so you're there for a couple of hours to half a day or a whole day at a time, $100 an hour, including GST, is a really good value rate that you work out your pricing by. And you might give them a job rate or you might be working hourly, and it doesn't matter either, neither here nor there in terms of that. Some jobs you definitely want to give them a job rate, but you've got to know your client to know what works well. And
yeah,
where people are doing more than that, they usually have a lot of unbillable time. So if you're doing 20-minute jobs, you're driving back and forth and you're losing that time driving, you're stopping for lunch somewhere, all those sorts of things. If
yeah,
you're doing 4 hours straight in one customer's yard, then that rate is lower.
yeah, yeah.
No way to put it.
Look, I've never really spoke. I'll give you some quick examples of how I operated. So quoting was always a tough one for me when I went out there. Wasn't sure,
Yeah,
what do I say? I was always like, what do I say? So I learned for me, I never did an hourly rate. Every job I did was always through the back 6, 7 years was always
quoted.
one fixed price. My more
Yeah,
skill that I had was more hedge trimming for some reason. That was more my specialty out of
yeah,
the whole thing.
nice.
And with hedge trimming,
Yep,
it's a lot of work. It's a lot of physical work on the shoulders, all that kind of stuff. Your arms, they're all sore, all that,
yeah,
or whatnot. And I was like, over the years, you start doing every day, you become, better at it and whatnot. And it's like, well, I know what my
yeah,
worth is on a job like this. So I may have been at a job for an
yeah,
hour, but I may have trimmed a 10-meter high hedge by 5 meters and whatever. And it was a big one that some people might be there all day. So I was charging what I would think was roughly the right place time. And that could have been a few $100s, and people were like, what? An hour? I'm like,
yeah,
but yeah, you're paying for the skill that I'm bringing in here of doing this on a daily basis. So I get all that kind of
yep,
stuff, but I never went overboard on it. But when I'd go quote, I the thing that I did that worked for me when I was a bit stuck, I would say to the person, if I wasn't 100% sure and I looked at it, I would say, well, what is your budget? I would say that to them. And I'll tell you why. I'd get two responses.
yeah,
I'd either get someone turn around to me and say, well, you're the expert, you should know, and make me look like an idiot and whatever. And I'd say, well, yeah, but I'm just curious what your budget is. And I'll tell you why, because I might walk in my head, I might have been thinking of a job, 100, $150, whatever. And they might turn around to me and they'll
yeah,
say, oh, $400, $500. Yeah. So I went, okay. So
yeah,
how I worked, and I've shared it with many people, I would never turn around then and say, okay, $400. I'd never do that. I just wouldn't do it on principle.
yeah,
I'd turn around then and I may have upped my job an extra 50 or $60 and said, okay, $200.
yeah,
And I'll tell you why, because they've then got a good deal off me. They're happy. I've made my
yep,
money and a little bit
yep,
extra for my hard work. And they now I
yep,
know are going to recommend me and we're all winning. That's how I operated.
yeah,
That's what I was trying. I mean, uh, and when I
yeah,
go and quote, when I'd go and quote, most of the time would be late in the evening, or when they get home or whatnot, or on a weekend. That's now my valuable time with my family or whatever. So I'm now driving out there, wasting an hour of my time or whatever I am. You're chatting them for a long time and all that. Um,
Yeah.
I did not want to lose on that time. I was like, I want that job. I
Yeah.
want to be there and I want to do it now. I don't want to waste my time. So I always went in with that
Yeah.
quote, not too high, but a reasonable thing, knowing. And I'll be honest with you, I probably only ever got knocked back in my whole career by about 3 or 4 quotes. And I'm being completely honest on
Yeah.
that because I didn't want, I
Yep.
looked at it as quoting is valuable time for me that I'm not getting paid for. I never put it on to the
Yep.
next, I'm going to make that up on the quote, whatever. I just drove over there and then just did the job. But I found as long as I had steady incoming work always came through, somehow, yeah, it was a bit of a toll on my body, but somehow it evened itself out over time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. CatchPro has been a supporter of Aussie Lawn Stars since its very first episode. Since we've formed a partnership with CatchPro, a lot of Aussie Lawn Stars have made orders using the code LawnStars10 in all caps. And the lucky Ray from Sydney won the Equipment Defender racks right before Christmas. I'm letting you know that all the support for the month of February will be going towards BJ's choice of charity, Queensland Children's Hospital. A lot of people in the industry would turn around and say, if you only lost 2 or 3 quotes in the entire time, then you were too cheap, right? But the argument there is if you're satisfied with the price
Yeah,
and your business is heading the direction you want it to head, then that's good.
yeah, yeah,
And I think the real risk I see in pricing and quoting is most people are going to have less budget than what you actually think it's worth, not the other way around. It's not very often that they go, oh, yeah, you know what, I'm happy to spend twice that much. I want you to do a really good job. And usually, if they want you to spend twice as much, they want you to be there twice as long. So
yeah, yeah,
you're
yeah,
like, okay, if I'm going to spend more time tickling the edges of the hedge and making sure it looks spotless and perfect, I'm going to charge for it.
yeah,
And I had one customer where I quoted $1,000 plus GST to do a tidy up on their yard. And he comes back and he says, oh, can you do cash price?
yeah,
And at that point in my business, I was like, no, I don't do cash. I said to him straight up, I said, look, I don't do cash. If you want cheaper, I can do less work. So do you want me
yeah,
to do less work or do you want me to do the full job? And he says, no, I want it done properly. So I'll pay the full price.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But it really
Interesting.
comes down to communication and clear communication.
100%. I found that if the communication is pretty straight up front and everything, it mainly runs pretty smoothly moving forward. But yeah, as I said, I'm
Yeah.
spiraling down memory lane here now of lots of things.
Yeah.
Like I was lucky. I would just say I was lucky. I think in my whole career there was probably about 2 jobs I did where I lost my
Yeah.
money on. That was pretty good run I
Yeah.
had where I never thought it would happen to me. And that was only a few years ago where they just wouldn't pay. And I was just like, I tried everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, I got to walk away from this, It wasn't a lot, but I was just, it hurt because I was like, man, I worked hard for that money. But, as I said,
Mm.
it's, yeah, I'm sure we've all got a lot of similar stories we could share.
Yeah. I've lost a couple of times where it was like $100 odd, but I lost one job where it was 2,500 and that hurt.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Um,
So, but yeah.
Yeah, because I remember writing about it, and so you always hear the people say, "And I do not do this." I'm making this very clear. Everyone goes, "Go back and spray Roundup on the lawn" or something like that. It was actually one
Yeah.
where I mulched. It was actually one where I had mulched a garden bed,
Yeah.
and an
Yeah.
idea was like, well, what do I do here? And I didn't know, and I really worked hard for this family, and I decided, I'm ringing the police. I'm going to find out what I can do here. And they were no help. I said, well, can I go back and grab all that mulch and all that now? It was about a week later. They said, no, mate, now you'll be trespassing. I just went, oh man, I just, it was just, it's crazy. And that's right, because I had
Yeah.
branches and stuff. I said, well, can I just chuck them back on there and their thing? And they said, no, you can't. You're not allowed. Because I'd read all the comments on groups of what they say you should do, and you can't. There's not a
Yeah.
lot you can do. You got to walk away.
Yeah, it's very true. And if you're a little bit less professional, you just do it anyway and hope that they don't call the police. And then it gets into a
Yeah.
contest about who's lying and telling the police what, right? As,
Yes.
oh, they
Yeah.
didn't pay me. Oh no, this guy illegally trespassed on my property.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I've heard a lot of stories of people dumping their grass clippings on the driveway or worse.
I can't be doing any of that stuff now, mate.
No, no, and I've never done that, to be clear.
Yeah.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah. 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 Neither have I. Yeah.
But so your business model now, and to be clear, I don't want to give away your trade secrets. You
Oh, no.
and Tim and Sean are doing work in Australia that is absolutely phenomenal. And I think no matter which way you spin the way that you make it a business, you guys are helping the community out. So I think it's phenomenal. But your business model, I think it's really clear, right? You do work that is appealing for people to watch on social media, and it's helping people out, and you've got sponsors now.
So it's and honestly, it's a tricky one. It's I always and I say this. I don't really have much to hide on this. I've always been upfront and honest with a lot of things I do, and you know, from day one, I've done everything I can to help the lawn mowing community. I've helped many contractors. My page is about
Yeah,
giving back to a lot. I'm all for it because I remember where I come from, and I get, you know, the grind daily. I was put into, obviously, I went into a situation where my pages grew to a point that,
yeah,
you know, well, I'll say it the way it is without, and I don't mean this in another way, but the largest page in Australia across social media in lawn mowing gardening. That's where it went to. So that put me in a position
yep,
of what do I do? What do I do? I can either continue mowing lawns and earning money from them and filming and get all the benefits which I can technically, you know, I take for my hard work, or I go down the path of I stop my paid work after I watch when sponsors come in and that stuff, and I go, okay,
yeah,
that's leveling out what I was getting prior and a little bit more and whatnot. And as I said, I earned that, and I did. I earned the hard
yeah,
work from that, and
for sure.
I can turn around and use my platforms to give back. And I went down that path because of my story, obviously, but also that
Yeah,
felt better for me. I enjoy it. And as I said, it's therapy. If you've heard my story, it helps me with stuff that's going on
yeah,
in my life. So I went down that. But the thing is, my audience on social media, it's a tricky one because I have people all around the world. There are people that don't speak English, so they love
yeah,
just time lapse videos in fast. There's no talking. Then there's people that
yep,
just like me pulling a weed or something like that. Others get frustrated as anything from it, all that stuff. Then you've got obviously the knocking on doors, which I experimented with over the last 2 years, and I enjoy that. To be honest, I like speaking with the people and highlighting stuff and showing it on my
yeah,
channels. And then obviously there's the sponsorship stuff where you've got to go a little bit in depth about the tools and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
it's sort of a lot of different areas. Like if I talk on a video, all of a sudden maybe half the audience don't watch it because they don't know what I'm talking about because they don't understand English or something like that. So I have to cater here
yeah,
for a lot of different areas, but I chose to go down that path because it was literally two options. I cash in completely on all of this for myself, or I do this
yep,
other way. And if you watch my videos, and as I say to a lot of the lawn mowing contractors that have, let's be fair, put a bit of hate on me for I don't feel a great reason. If you watch my
yeah,
video, you will see I give back a lot of money to a lot of these people. Now, I don't need to do that. That could go to my family. I do that because I'm
yeah,
appreciative of what I got. But if you listen to what I say in a lot
yeah,
of those videos when I'm wherever I am, Central Coast, out west, wherever, I always say,
yeah,
use some of that money to pay for one of the contractors in your area to look after your lawns, because that's my way of saying to the bloke out there doing what we do, mate, I hope they call you and there's something for you if you want it to put food on your table, and you might get a regular gig out of that or more in the street, whatever helps. That's what I try to do. And I hope people see that is how I try to use
Yeah.
my platforms, if that makes sense, because I don't forget
Yeah.
about the industry that has also given me a lot too.
I think you, Tim, and Sean. So the three names I'll keep bringing up. The three that I know that are doing really well on social media with satisfying, overgrown jobs, giving back to the community, and Sean from Blade Mate. He's got a voice for radio. He's such a soothing voice to listen to. Tim's good at telling a joke, having a bit of fun, and yeah, your videos again. Like I don't see anybody hating on you when you do talk. I think that the when you do talk, it's really highlighting that there's somebody that you're helping out.
Yeah, but well, mate, and a lot of people would see this in the lawn mowing industry. You go to houses, or you can see the one next door. There's a lot
Yeah,
going on behind closed doors, and
yeah,
I'm grateful that I've been able to find a way through my platforms where when I come across someone struggling, or there's been a few stories we've been lucky to help people, that I have a platform
yeah,
that I can speak up and everyone jumps on board, and whether that's raising the money, whether that's getting them a new place, whatever. I think for me that's a good way to be able to use this, because you know, there are a lot of people out there
yeah.
struggling, and if we can help them, then we're all winning.
Well, there's a lot of scammers online these days that are happy to take your money too. But when you see a platform that's as popular as yours and you're going, okay, the person Nathan's helping is legitimately in need, we're raising money for a serious cause, people are happy to get behind it and put some money down.
Yeah, yeah, and you're not sure. I did two GoFundmes this year. You got to. That's a tricky one. I've always stayed away from that stuff
Yeah,
because I've said A, because of my
yeah.
past. It's an uncomfortable
Mm,
thing for me to be trusted with all that stuff, But B, it's just you, you can get a lot of negativity too, of you help someone and people hating on that person, or why are they getting the money, or why this, why that.
yeah.
That stuff can start happening. And
Yep.
as I said, I tried it twice, and I didn't think the first time would be. I thought we'd be lucky to get $5,000 because it doesn't matter how many followers you got. That doesn't mean everyone's going to donate money. A lot of people might not even see it.
Mm,
And we were lucky. The first family, we raised 70,000 for, and the second one was over 50,000. And that's life
nice.
changing. And as I said, that's not me. That's everyone else. And I always say that jumping in, and I'm appreciative for that
Yeah,
because I'm still in contact to this day with those two people, and they're now
yeah.
friends,
Nice.
of mine, and I take that
Yeah.
as a privilege, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does make sense. I look at those situations and I know you're going to cop criticism from some of your audience. I was watching a video before we started this interview. You just stand on top of your ute celebrating 3 million Instagram followers.
Did
And I'm
someone have
like,
anything? I
wow,
didn't
that
say
is,
it.
that's great. But you're going to find a couple of people there that'll criticize you when you've got 3 million followers on one platform. And I guess that comes with the territory, but also it comes when you're helping people where it's easy for somebody to cast judgment. And I've talked to Sean from Blade Mate. I talk to Tim occasionally, and I'm guarantee you'll say the same thing. If you are helping somebody in need, you really need to pause your own judgment on that person that's in need and just go, I've got to help them blindly, not look into them and investigate them and just be 100% sure that they actually are in need. You've got to just go, no, they're asking for help. They're in need. I'm not going to make a judgment call on that. I don't see drug dealer turning up to their house. That's the limit of my investigation.
Mate, some of the jobs I do, they're random. I'm driving home, I see an overgrown lawn, I go knock.
Yeah.
Once I do that, I'm committed. I don't know who's behind the door.
Yeah.
It could be anyone, but
Yep.
I'm now on their
Yeah.
space, knocking on their door. They open. well, I got to go through with what I'm saying. I'm here to mow the lawn. Would you like me to do it for you for free?
Yeah.
And some say yes, some tell me to see you later. But
Yeah.
it's I'm there, I'm committed, and as I always say, I don't care about their story. It's none of my business. As I said, people hear my story.
Yeah.
I'm the last person to judge who they are. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. As I said, it's look. Don't get me wrong. You can miss some of those manicured lawns you regularly look after a fortnight. That's pretty easy work, turning up to those compared to some of these jungles. But for me, I've
Yeah.
always been I enjoy the challenge. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Maybe I need to go see someone about it, but I enjoy that kind of stuff. I like to step back
Yeah.
and look at that end result when it's finished. But yeah, mate, I
Yeah.
I I can cop a lot of hate online, and I was saying it to a mate the other day. It's like the more people that follow you, the more obviously your videos are going out to people, and the more on social media, which I've had to learn, everyone's got an opinion, and sometimes it's a pretty
Yeah.
awful opinion that comes your way, but you've just got to. Like, at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
I used to take it personal. Like I'd be like, "What? What's this bloke saying about? Who's this
Yeah.
bloke? Like, what have I done wrong?" But now it's just that's part and parcel of of what I do, and you know.
Yeah.
I know that there's always going to be someone that ain't going to be happy with what I do, and that's life, mate.
Yeah. That's it. And you've got to develop broad shoulders when you got that many eyes on you.
Yeah, it's not easy. I'm not going to lie. I'm human. I'm still human, mate. I'm no different. As I say, I'm no different to the next bloke,
Yeah.
mate. It's just a number near my name. That number could be gone tomorrow. But you do. You've
Yeah.
just got to. Sometimes it's best not to read the comments. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I agree. And I think I've heard a number of people say the same thing. If they've got a lot of following, then you're better off not reading comments, or you have a administration person that will just tell you the comments that you need to know, and they don't tell you about the ones that are not worth reading. But Nathan, look, I've kept you for over an hour.
Yep,
Um, I reckon it'd be good to talk about some of the lighter hearted moments you've come across doing this, and whether you've been chased off the property by a dog or you've found a dead body under the corrugated iron. What's some of the standouts?
mate. You remember in the beginning, I told you I used to go and blow a path at Hunters Hill for $15 every Friday. That was what I did. Spent half an hour there, probably the biggest
Yeah.
house in the street. They had a dog, and it was I
Yeah.
forget which one it was, but it was a very territorial dog. And when the owner, the lady, would come out, just to say, "Hey, can you blow under there or whatever?" It would get very territorial.
Mm.
Anyway, one day it was there, it came up and it full bit me on the leg, like broke skin and everything. I was
Ouch.
packing it. I was running. I was packing. I was out there for $15, crying my eyes out. Anyway, I turned around. I got a message straight away from the lady, and I said, "Mate, I've lost a day because I had to go get a tetanus shot and all this kind of stuff and whatever." And I said, "I've lost a full day's pay because of this, and I normally
Yeah.
never do this." I said, I think to be fair, I need to be compensated about $100 for today or something like that. Straight away, $500 in my account, and I told me mate, and I was like, "That's because they'll probably go to you thought you were going to say legal action or something against them, and they would have been in all sorts of trouble." But that one always stood out.
Yeah.
But look, I
Yep.
think like a lot of people, it's mainly the dogs. I've had a few run-ins with some dogs, some pretty hectic ones, where you go over. They say
Yep.
that there's no dog at home. Walk around the back and have a quote. You open the fence, you walk around, and there's a massive staffy there, territorial, just looking at
Yeah.
you, and you're like doing the bolt over the fence and all that. But I don't know, mate.
Yep.
It's been an interesting journey. I'm sure, like a few, you find the odd $5 or $20 hidden in the grass, or stuff like that. It's
Yep.
like, yeah, look at this.
Yeah. A few other foreign objects that shouldn't be mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. Yes, yes, yes. But I think I will say the one thing I always say that it's always the only pet hate I have in the industry is when you come across needles or something like that. That's the only thing I always shake my head on
Yeah.
because it's like stick them in the bin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not that hard. And
Mm.
there's bins around specifically for it. So I know
I just,
there's a lot of people that have a real need to be using needles, like they actually have a prescription
yep.
that they need to apply themselves, whatever it might be. And then there's a lot of people that don't have a genuine need for it, or they might have a genuine need for something they can't get from the doctor. I don't know. I'm not judging,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
but
yeah,
put it in
yeah.
the right place.
But mate, I'll leave that one on. I actually enjoy when I driving around and I see my fellow lawn contractors or in the street or across the road or whatever. I've always been that type
Yeah,
where I'll stop and say g'day. I don't look at it as we're competition. I look at it as just another guy doing the same thing as me, and it's good to know them, because
yeah,
sometimes you may need them or something broke down, or they give you a bit of work, or you give them work, or something like that. We're all doing the same thing.
yeah. That's it. No, like I said, I've interviewed Sean from Blade Mate. He's up my way. He's just a little bit further north than me, up at Maitland. And I actually, last time I was talking to him, I said, "Hey, why don't we hook up and do a collaboration one day? I'll come up and do one of those overgrown jobs with you. But I should do run down to Sydney and meet up with you one time too. That'd be fun."
Mate, I'm happy to come up to the Central Coast. As I said, I love going up there. I love
Yeah.
it. The people are fantastic,
Well,
and there's a lot of people up there that need a little bit of a hand. And as I
why
said,
don't
mate,
why don't I when I've got a little bit of spare time, I'll run around the local area and see if there's any overgrown yards that I'm like, that'd be a good job for Nathan. I'll ping you a couple of photos,
I'm all
see
up.
what we find.
Mate, I'm all for it, 100%. Because I've done a few where I literally it only takes me 40, 50 minutes to drive up. I go up there for the day,
Yeah,
do a bit of a lawn, have some lunch, and then come home that night. It's good.
sounds good to me.
Lock it in, mate. You
Well,
send me
I'll
something, and I'm there.
see what I can find for you.
Fantastic.
Hey, Nathan, look, thanks for your time. It's been great to chat with you, and I'm going to keep in contact.
100%. Thank you for having me on this. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.